Hello, and welcome to this session on the NeoRenaissance. The creative economy generates nearly 50 million jobs worldwide that earn annual revenue of nearly 2 trillion annually, according to UN estimates. NFTs are now transforming the way art, music, and sporting events are experienced and sold. Globally, nations are prioritizing leisure, culture, art, music, and entertainment as enriching aspects of functional societies and sustainable happiness. As education progresses and new skills are cultivated, there is a shifting paradigm on how to measure human development and the concept of happiness. How can investing in the arts and culture improve the quality of life for people around the world? So we're here to break it down. I'm with a group of experts who have all of the answers, and they're going to give them to us today. I'm Suzanne Kiampour. I'm the presenter of the BBC's Out of the Shadows. With us today, we have Her Excellency Irina Bokova, former Director General of UNESCO, and we have Mohammed Ibn Dael, I said it in Arabic, CEO of the Cultural Development Fund of Saudi Arabia, and Alejandro Navia, co-founder and president of NFT Now. So I'd like to start with Her Excellency Irina Bokova and ask you, why is it so important to preserve cultural history, particularly when technology is advancing so quickly?
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Thank you for this question and the wonderful introduction of this topic today. I would say that I'm delighted that questions of culture, of heritage, of art, of creativity are part of this important discussion about priority. And of course, they resonate deeply with my experience at UNESCO, the United Nations organization, which is the guardian of world heritage, natural, cultural, intangible heritage, promoting arts education, promoting cultural industries, promoting the idea that human development is fundamentally also a cultural development. You cannot neglect it, and it has been for a very long time considered that culture does not have, and arts does not have anything to do with sustainable development. It's something for the elites, it's something for experts, for people who know more about it. And nowadays there is a big shift, and there is a better understanding that culture is about our identity. Each one of us has an identity, has a background. Culture is about where we belong to. It's a sense of belonging. Culture is about creativity. Culture is about experiences. It's about community experiences. Culture, of course, is about history. And I believe it is in as much about history as about what kind of a future we want to have. Because the way we protect heritage, the way we share heritage, the way we have cultural literacy about the others, it's very much about whether we can live together and what kind of future we want to have. And from that point of view, of course, I'm very much tempted having here next to me His Excellency, if he allows me, Mohammed, because I'm also a member of the advisory board of ALULA, one of the fascinating projects. I would say the jewel into the 2030 agenda for the development of Saudi Arabia, because this is not just the first World Heritage Site, Hegra, the Nabatean kingdoms. It is a lot about prehistory, it's about rock art, when we see that human beings have created these very early ages. But it is also about community development, it is about the young people, it is about skills, it is about sustainable tourism, it is about creation, and it is about also diversity, because there you can find heritage, which is prehistory, which is Islamic, which is Jewish, which is I would say, the expression of a wonderful mixture of exchange between different cultures, all through the ages. And nowadays, Saudi Arabia puts a big priority into this. I just think this is wonderful.
It's a great segue, Your Excellency. Saudi Arabia is putting such an emphasis on this. why are arts and culture so important to the quality of life for people in Saudi Arabia, but also for people around the world? I don't think we often look at art from this lens.
That's a great question. So I'll take it back a little, and we can look at the survey that we've just recently seen, and it talked about what was most important to people, and financial security. So we will start with arts and culture in terms of how it plays a major role in the economy. In Saudi Arabia, we haven't fully captured yet arts and culture within our economy, but I can talk about a more developed economy that has invested in arts and culture, such as the US. This represents approximately between 4 and 5% of the US economy. Now, if we bring it back to people, culture itself is, as my colleague here indicated, represents a really way to bring people together. And we can bring it back to the anecdote of living to work or working to live. There's a lot of passion when people work in culture. And if you bring the aspect of the effect on the economy, growth in the economy, and working where you have passion in this work. The survey indicated 2 of the top five reasons why the Great Resignation was people's passion in terms of what they want to do in work, and they talked about meaningless work. And so we, in terms of working in the cultural sector, there's a belief that when someone works in that sector, they're doing it for their passion. It's not that they're working or living to work. And so within Saudi, one of the more powerful messages that was done by the government is we instituted a quality of life program. It's a government institution that looked at how to improve the quality of life of individuals in Saudi. One of these programs, in terms of government intervention, was the Cultural Development Fund. And so the actual relevance and importance to the kingdom of culture in terms of investing in culture and arts provided us with this mechanism to sort of look at the alignment between the Saudi government and its people and see how we can invest and improve the quality of life of people. Reality is, I can tell you, in terms of our first programs when we started, we've seen, we did this demand study to see how much demand there was for culture and arts related projects. Our demand study showed a certain level, and we've shot over the roof of that level. Just shows you that there is a lot of demand in terms of quality culture and arts projects. And so for us, it seems like a no-brainer in terms of the quality of life and improvement of quality of life for the people. I would say I'll talk about Saudi and what we've seen experience, but all over the world in terms of how we can bring people together.
I've been to Al Ula. It was fascinating. So I think when we talk about art, we think about kind of, we have a general sense of art in a traditional way. You are an NFT expert.
There's nothing expert about it. I'm very much student. So like the word expert, I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm very much still learning it. But I think when we speak about the renaissance of what's happening in the cultural aspect of the arts, I really would like to bring this back to 3 pillars, right? And I think the renaissance is really about identity, culture, and ownership, right? And all these different concepts of identity come down to storytelling, right? And it really drives who we are. I like to ask a question to the audience. How many of you have uploaded a photo in the last 24 hours in some way, shape, or form, or sent a photo digitally? Raise your hand, like, okay. How many of you have sent an email in the last hour? Raise your hand.
Like
All right.
10.
How many of you based on that information, how many of you think you own that photo that you uploaded? Okay, that's one. How many of you believe that you own the email that you sent? One person, right, guys? So it comes down to the reality is like whatever we're doing in our daily lives, in our digital renaissance of like this aspect, we don't have ownership in it. So what NFTs have been able to provide us is not only the ability to share what we're doing, but actually take ownership of what we do, right? NFT is a non-fungible token that lives on a certain sets of blockchains, whether it's Ethereum, Polygon, or any other ones that it does. But there's non-fungible means that there's only one unique version of that. Right? And so it means that if I'm the holder of that token, no one else can have that token, and I actually can get paid or interacted with that token. And the beautiful thing about ownership is that it allows you to bring into another concept that we all love, which is our identities, right? We all love showcasing who we are, what we do, what we stand for, what are our values, right? I feel that everybody here in some way, shape, or form has bought a piece of clothing to kind of signify who you are, to signal to the world, this is who I am, right? How many of us have bought an art piece because of the love and the passion that you have garnered from that, and it's like, hey, this is part of my identity. This is reflective of who I am, right? How many of us have actually in some point of our lives have sacrificed one thing in order to obtain another, right? For me, it's a watch. Like, I'm a horologist. I love it, right? And I would rather save money for the watch than go out to eat in a fancy meal. So it's like all these little things are starting to come around our identities and ownership, right? And when we start thinking more along the storytelling, the aspects of what we're doing, the digital renaissance that's happening through NFTs are going to go beyond art. Art is just the beginning. For the first time in history, we have now taken away the middlemen who have, the gatekeepers who have pressed so many different artists against them, or quote unquote, we are now changing the narrative of starving artists. I think my role here as the president and co-founder of NFT Now is in my lifetime, I want to get rid of that statement. I want starving artists to be a thing of the past, right? It's about here giving the opportunity and the democracy for an artist to connect directly to their community, to their audience, to their buyer, to their collector. But then if we think about that digital ownership aspect of what art is, that's just the beginning. And this is the first time in history that we actually look at a piece of technology that's been adopted by culture first and then been brought to mainstream. What do I mean by that? When you think about the internet and the adoption of the internet, some of the first people were thinking about connectivity, right? Let's connect each other. The second phase of the internet, we'll talk about it like post-2002, was all about reach. How can we get the reach? How can we get the most people? How do we get the more thing? Volume, scale, let's get to that connectivity. But now, when you think about Web3 and you think about NFTs, it's truly about ownership. It's about creating a pillar, creating an economy that actually allows you to take ownership of your digital lives. And art is the beginning. Now we can think about it from car titles, mortgages, financial concepts. We can reduce fraud in terms of so many different levels of identity. We can reduce fraud in the luxury markets. We can now actually prove that your identity and the way that you graduated from whatever university is now a non-fungible token within your wallet and your identity from that capacity. So you now no longer have to keep these records and that going back, right? Let's talk about medical records. How many of you actually have or ownership of your medical record? Right? Like that is like your medical identity is who you are, and you depend on a third party that you don't even know what's in it. Like you haven't even opened that file to say, hey, this is what's being written about me. And so that is where I feel the renaissance of what is happening with NFTs and blockchain come in. It's like, it's starting with art. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because art is a form of story that so many of us can identify with and actually have an experience with taking ownership. And the second, third, fourth order magnitude of things is going to be an incredible renaissance across the world, across digital ownership.
Some serious food for thought.
Absolutely.
So we often think collectively this summit is about priorities in the future of humanity. Do each of you think that the pandemic played a role in perhaps elevating art as a priority in life? And I want each of you to answer this question. And also, I want to know from each of you how art and culture has impacted you individually. We'll start this end. Ladies first.
Well, it's a very good question. I believe definitely COVID-19, we have seen that we cannot live without culture and without art. It just invaded our homes during lockdowns and isolation, and I think it kept a lot of us alive and kind of a new renaissance, a new interest towards this. And it, on the other side, encouraged cultural institutions, because it was digital, most of it. It encouraged cultural institutions to accelerate the digital access, museums, theaters, all different kinds of musical institutions. And I believe until this moment, many people were thinking that, afraid of if they go digital, then people will not be interested anymore. I remember we made a big conference on the future of books. And people say, oh, no, books will just disappear, or museums will disappear because they will go digital. And it is just the opposite. It's digital, people are looking at that, and it creates more even interest, more thirst for culture and going to these museums and sharing and having it as a cultural institution. So I think COVID really changed accelerated the shift, the paradigm of why culture is important.
Wonderful. 1 minute for each of you.
Okay, so I think one of the most important things, sitting at home alone, provided for really good way to look internally, yourself and your family. And this, in terms of culture, what your interests are, there's a lot of people internally sat at home and thought they wanted to shift careers because they felt they wanted to do something differently. A lot really shifted to arts and culture. And so I do think the pandemic affected a lot of people in that sense and added to enriching people's lives, I would say.
Silver linings.
Yeah, I think this was an incredible black swan event that none of us expected. And I think that we're now starting to see the positive aspects of the thing that happens, right? Change is hardest at the beginning, messiest in the middle, and best at the end. And we're still very much in the messy part of what we're doing. But I think net, this is going to be looked back and say, this is one of the best events that could have happened to the global economies from a different perspective. Look, I think arts and culture are humanity.
Exactly.
Plain and simple, right? It is through art and storytelling that we actually get to learn and connect with one another. We actually get the symbolisms from that concept, and something that it drives, it's the understanding. So at NFT Now, for us, it's really about empowering the creators of culture and really bringing and onboarding 1 billion people to NFTs, right, over the next decade. And in doing so, we feel that not only arts and culture are going to help drive this movement, but it's going to be the pillar that drives it, right? Because it's so much part of our identity. For me, the pandemic and arts and culture really changed me because without it, we would have never founded NFT Now, right? So that in and out of itself, I wouldn't be here. It had not those events happened. And I just love to see how many people have changed their lives through art and say, hey, I've always wanted to be this poet, or I've always wanted to be this writer, or that book I've always had inching, or you know what, that thing or that piece of art that I've been working since college. Like, there's so many dreams that have been realized. And I think if I want to summarize this in a really key aspect is the pandemic through arts and culture have brought authentic expression.
Amen. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.